If people join online after this point, Lucy, my colleague here, will send them the vision and goals document that we'll be talking about later. Okay, but first, I want the lovely Melinda Gant to kick us off.
I'm in the ranks, even though there might be some other people that come in. Melinda Gant, Anchorage Community Development Authority, and I am really happy to see the love of support of the Midtown District Plan today. This is a project that we've been working on for a little while. We've got 3 community councils and we've got steering committee members who have been participating with us and putting a lot of energy every month in trying to develop a Midtown District Plan. So Jacob is one of them. Tara, Sean, Burris, where's Chris Donor? Chris Donor. And do we have anybody from Spenard? Matt, thank you. And then Sarah Prescott is also another member, but I don't see her. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because you've got a lot of work ahead of you, and Holly is going to engage with you next, I think.
Well, all of us are, yeah.
That is right. So I'm going to hand this back off to Holly. Thank you everyone for being here and participating.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to introduce the project team quickly, but first, it's with gratefulness and respect. We acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people. We are committed to recognizing and celebrating the culture and language of the Dena'ina people. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to point out the members of the project team. We have Carly Moff with the planning department. She's our planning department representative here today. We have Christine Bonnell. She's the lead planner on this, a consultant. We have Shanna Zuthban with Agnew Beck Consulting. She's focusing on the housing and economic analysis. And then with the Huddle team, we have Lucy Whitlinger, a landscape architect, and myself, Holly Schultz. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to start off with a quick, what is the Midtown District Plan? Why are we here? What have we done so far? What are we going to do next? We're going to start with that. Hello. Hold on. My tools moved around. All right, we're going to talk about the planning area. We're going to talk about the plan process and the schedule. We're going to talk about all the work that happened this summer with the existing condition summary. Shannon's going to give you a detailed presentation on the economic and housing analysis that she's done to date. And then we're going to have you work in your colored sticky note groups for a little while, talking about the vision and goals. Okay. All right, so what is the Midtown District Plan? The Midtown District Plan will eventually become an element of Anchorage's comprehensive plan, which is what you hear people call Anchorage 2020. You hear that a lot. You also hear people refer to Anchorage 2040 land use plan, which is the land use plan map that accompanies the narrative of Anchorage 2020. So these are overarching guiding policy documents that drive community growth, drive things like housing, economics, public lands, transportation. And so Anchorage 2020 and 2040 are the overarching guiding documents for our city. Within 2020 and 2040, we have things that are called functional plans. And functional plans provide more specific detail to specific functions in our city. So it would be things like the park plan or the trails plan or an active transportation plan. So those are functional plans. Also kind of on that level are area specific plans. And that's what this is. The Midtown District Plan is an area specific plan. So an area specific plan stays consistent with the overarching Anchorage Bowl Comp Plan. but it provides more specific direction for different areas of our community, like Midtown, because there's different conditions here than there are, say, on the hillside, or West Anchorage, or East Anchorage. So it allows you to provide more specific detail for Midtown while still staying consistent with the overarching guiding policy document, Anchorage 2020. And then you have things below functional plans and area specific plans that start to implement these policy level plans, like the capital improvement list, or the state capital improvement list, or Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, the zoning map. So zoning, Title 21, and the CIP and the TIP, those are all things that fund all the things we want to do. Those are the plans that implement what we do. So I think it's important to understand that these area-specific plans are the part of our city guiding policy. This is where we are today. This is how the plan fits within the framework. Okay. This is the planning area. It includes not only the full boundary of the Midtown Community Council, but it also includes areas of Spenard and North Star. So Spenard Road on the west, Seward Highway on the east, International on the south, and Chester Creek on the north. Okay, so the project timeline, how does where we are today fit into the context of the whole plan? The first public meeting we had in the spring was the project kickoff. It's where we started doing the work to develop the vision and goals. We had multiple steering committee meetings, community council meetings, the first public meeting, and we used all the information that we gathered at that point to develop these draft vision and goals that we're going to talk more about today. Okay. I'll describe more of that in a minute. Then this summer, the team was busy doing an existing conditions report and analysis. And then here we are at public meeting number 2, which is where we're going to check in on these vision and goals and say, hey, this is what we think we heard. Did we get it right? But also we're going to start moving down the road to implementation, right? You'll notice that on this vision and goals document, there's also action items associated with it. So not only are we going to say, hey, did we get this right based on what we heard, but we also want to know, also, how do you think we should implement these things? Because the plan's only as good as like actually doing it, right? So we want to understand your ideas for how you think we should implement these things. Okay, after this meeting, we're going to start working on the implementation part of the plan, but we're also going to start drafting a draft land use plan map. So we're going to, along with this area plan, you will have a land use plan map. It may or may not be different than 2020-40, but this is your opportunity to think through what that looks like. And we'll start working on the public review draft of the whole plan, and we'll be ready to share that sometime this winter. After that, we'll have another public meeting where you get to review the public review draft and talk about it. And then in the spring of 2025, we'll start moving through the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Assembly for reviews and approval. Okay, so since there was a lot of work that happened this summer with the existing conditions report, I'm gonna pass it on to Christine to talk to you about these things. Thank you. And you just let me know.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Holly. Thanks everybody for being here tonight on this beautiful evening in the fall. I appreciate you all coming out and also appreciate the team again. Holly introduced us all. Just so you all know, we were able to do this plan because of a grant that ACDA sought from the Assembly. And so we appreciate the fact that ACDA did that for us. So what you see up front now is a little bit of a map of homesteaders that were in the Anchorage area. You'll hear this planning effort refer to Midtown as being the center of Anchorage, of being the center of our community and the center of our economy. The existing conditions report reports out on and provides a snapshot in time for this centrally located area, taking us from the place where Denina would gather berries and mostly camp, probably next to Fish Creek, to the homestead days in the 1940s and 50s, and through subdivisions and the current development that we have now. So there's a little bit of history and background in the existing conditions report. Midtown now has large corporate buildings, convenient strip mall shopping, and a lot of eating, lots of small business operations. Our government services here in the Midtown area include the many utilities. They manage our roadways and they provide transit operations. There are many opportunities for new businesses and housing development in Midtown, which could include building conversions, infill lots, all of which would need to be supported by upgraded infrastructure and potential Title 21 and Title 23 updates. This plan can identify locations for redevelopment or new development, similar to what was done for downtown. If you all are familiar with the downtown plan suggested focused area development sites. And these development sites could allow for the 3 community councils to prioritize capital projects consistent with the plan. Exactly what Holly was mentioning with her introduction there. The district exudes a certain sense of place. Do you guys all agree with that? I mean, you come into Midtown and you know you're in Midtown, and it's kind of, you're looking around the buildings, what we see there. We know that it's a certain place. It's not like downtown. It's different. It's not like the east side. It's not like the west side. When we come into Midtown, we know we're in Midtown. And with its premier commercial offerings, our parks, our schools, our streets, and our housing, we know and we can identify with the Midtown area. We have large government assets, one that is called the Midtown Jewel, that's Cuddy Park, and then the Lusac Library. There is both publicly and privately owned larger tracts of land, some that could be developed, and then some that are sitting vacant right now. We completed a review of all the zoning districts to make an initial determination during this planning process, and that's the table that you see right there. And just to kind of determine what the zoning says we could do as far as housing. Agnew Beck also completed a zoning in its existing housing analysis, which Shanna will talk about. And this table looks like we could have a bunch more housing, but doesn't factor what's already built and any environmental constraints. We also have on your table what we're calling the Midtown Core. And this is a similar idea to what downtown has with its downtown core. And with this Midtown Core, there could be opportunities for using the B2 zoning district that is currently in downtown. We might also want to reimagine Cuddy Park, identify places where we can have wayfinding and new signage. Midtown is the gateway to the most densely developed part of Anchorage. That's something we can share with travelers along our major streets. Additionally, with the studies completed for the Spadard Corridor and also Chugach Way and soon for Fireweek, there may be projects the plan can encourage. So everyone wants a safe place to live and do business. And as part of the existing conditions report, we did pull some crime statistics from the APD website to determine if crime had risen in this area. Unfortunately, we were unable to zero in just on Midtown. We did find that crime is increasing according to the statistics. And one of the unfortunate results of this crime is insurance rates are rising for the businesses in the area. So what are the things that we can do about that? The community councils are sharing their concerns with the assembly members and the administration to seek short and long-term solutions. One of the things that APD is doing is they are attending community council meetings on a regular basis to listen to the community and to also share what's happening with APD. And so the report talks a little bit about that. There are some existing solutions and there are other opportunities to be created. This plan has the opportunity to include those tools as action items supported by the vision and goals of this plan. This could include community support for the Assembly's anchored home plan, APD's crime mitigation tools, and we also know that APD needs to recruit more officers. Can this plan say something in there that we agree with that? We can also encourage new 24/7 businesses in Midtown, and there's a few suggested in the report. What those businesses could be, public and private spaces could be routinely activated. This could be events like pop-ups and food truck fairs, kind of like what we have now. More housing of all types can be made available to all income levels and demographics. This would aid our community in meeting the most important need that the Assembly is working on right now. This plan advocates for at least 500 new units in the next 10 years. Again, the number one issue to bringing new workers and residents to Anchorage is the lack of housing, according to a recent EDC report, Anchorage Economic Development Community. All right, lastly, what is a planning context? Well, that tells us existing plans that can influence our plan, and Holly touched on that a little bit, the 2020 comp plan and the 2040 land use plan. No plan that the municipality adopts is adopted without consideration of, at the very least, those two plans. So this plan will have influence from those two plans, and the 2040 land use plan is up on the wall over there as an example of that. AMATs and DOT and PF also have other plans or study documents that have informed this plan, and you may see action items from the Spinard Corridor Plan as well as the Chugach Way study. In reviewing what the Anchorage School District is doing as far as capital improvements go, we only found one project in the district area. But you all may say, hey, I see this or that going on at a school, and maybe we can work with the school and propose something that could go into our action items. There will be several attachments that go with the existing conditions report, and those are listed right here. The land suitability study, the commercial market analysis, and housing analysis will be provided by Agnew Beck. And then we hope to be initiating a step 3 working group to look at some code recommendations. That includes Title 21 and Title 23. And then the AMATS tip has several projects that will be included in a separate table to include as an. We're also working on a crime mitigation white paper that will pull together statistics and solutions, kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier in the plan. And so that'll be the attachments for this report. Any quick questions or anything like that before I let Shannon move on? Okay, thank you. You guys all have a copy there, and then there's it's available online too at acda.net. Thank you. Thanks, Christine. Lucy. right, thank you, everybody. I am gonna talk a little bit about the economic and housing analysis. Whoever was here in June saw some of this information already, but we've kind of been refining it. Really, the purpose of this work is kind of similar to some of the information that Christine shared. Can we help give you some background on the market, the economic, the housing trends to help inform the policies and the strategies for this plan? And June started sharing on the housing, so I'm gonna do like a refresh and some new information on that. And then we had an opportunity to reach out to kind of the more developer types and the commercial brokers in Midtown for a questionnaire, and just want to share some of their thoughts about what is likely to be most in demand in terms of development trends. And again, the reason for this is kind of like the planning strategies and the goals and the implementation measures. Some of them will fall squarely in the public sector realm, like improvements to streets or parks. But a lot of them will be about setting the table for the private sector to come and build projects. Or, you know, landowners maybe want to build on their own property. So thinking about it from that perspective can really be helpful when you're thinking of your strategies. Okay, so population-wise, the blue line is Anchorage, and you can see in around 2016, we peaked at almost 300,000 people and are now more like 289,000. So we've seen our population decline. We know that maybe some of our neighbors have moved out of state. Our baby boomer population is getting older and the next generation is not quite as large. So population trends are more declining or stable. Doesn't mean that's gonna stay that way. There's things we can do, you know, bring more housing to our community, offer more economic development opportunities, and kind of change that trajectory. Midtown is roughly 12,000 people in the census tracts that most closely align with the plan boundary, and it's about 4% of Anchorage's population. Looking out in the future, the Department of Labor is forecasting just about, I think, a 0.3% per year growth rate for Anchorage as a whole. So really just flat population. Again, that could change. They're just looking at the past few years and seeing those declines and aren't using other information. But the more that there's housing, the more there's economic opportunities, those trends could change. So this is, side note, there's probably like 55 slides behind this slide deck, and I'm only showing, I think, 13 today, but we'll be writing up some summary information that will be made available. But our approach to forecasting housing need is not just looking at population, right? There's lots of other things that go into that. And again, the reason we're talking about housing is it's come up quite a bit in the conversations already about Midtown. Let's have more housing, let's think about housing. Midtown is that core area that's really central to Anchorage, so we have to think about the broader trends in Anchorage overall. And we kind of estimate that there's a need for 9,600 units. That's not all new. So I can spend more time if folks have an interest after explaining how we come up with a rehab number, but I would say about half of that is kind of older housing that needs to be substantially rehabilitated. Roughly, kind of hard to see with the graphic there, but roughly 230 units are forecasted for population growth. And we see that 0.3% per year is not bringing in a whole bunch of new people. And then almost 5,000 units for overcrowding. And that overcrowding is actually probably very conservative in terms of the estimate. It's what HUD considers to be overcrowded. So you have to have a certain number of people per room for that definition they kick in. But we know there's lots of people who are maybe living with their grandparents or have come home from college and are staying with parents, and they would like a unit on their own as well, but they can't find anything in their price point. So that category is meant to capture that pent-up demand if we have more housing. This is what we call our housing bridge graphic, and it tries to kind of give folks a sense of who and what type of housing. And there's a lot of numbers, and I probably can't read all of it from here, but the main point of this is to say that there's housing need across all income spectrums. So roughly, a third of current households in Anchorage fall into that orange category, which is making incomes that are less than 80% of area median income. Less than 10% of our households fall into that middle turquoise category, which is kind of our middle class. It used to be our largest group many, many years ago. And then a larger percent is in that upper kind of middle class, making more than 120% of area median income. So that's kind of the way that the current demographics shake out. And when we look at the housing demand that I shared on the previous slide, again, this is Anchorage wide, not just Midtown. We take that overcrowding and we know that kind of falls more squarely on the lower income and the middle income groups, and we split that up proportionally there. So you can kind of see that that new housing need, I think, you know, roughly 70% of the new housing need falls into that under 80% of area median income, as well as that middle income group. The note at the far side of the slide says not all the housing needs quantifiable, so we use this model in a lot of places, and we try to interview employers and we try to think about, you know, what is the demand that we're not capturing? So a lot of times we hear from hospitals and school districts, especially in rural Alaska. I've got 85 openings right now and I have no housing, and so our population could grow if we had housing. That trend is similar in Anchorage as well. It's a little bit more challenging to quantify because there's a lot more economic activity, but we know that there are employers that want to, you know, keep people here and that there's the housing opportunities. Okay. This slide is really interesting. It's actually data we've been recently pulling from the census that we hadn't really looked at before. If anybody's ever gone out to get a mortgage, they'll usually tell you that your formula is 30% of your, you know, monthly income is what you can afford to spend on housing. So the flip side of that is if you're spending more than 30%, you're considered cost burden according to the US Census. And this slide is showing Alaska, Anchorage, and Midtown, where if you're making, you know, less than $20,000 a year, almost all of those households are cost burden, right? So it's a disproportionate impact to lower income households. As you start to make 75,000 and above, you often are spending that 30% measure, or maybe even less. You're only spending 20% of your income on housing. So we've started to kind of model this out and estimate, you know, how many households in Anchorage are not just in need of a new home because they're doubled up or tripled up in the unit, or they're living in an older house, or they want a new house to kind of stay in a job that they really like here. But there's quite a few households that are here in Anchorage who are paying more than even 35% of their income on housing. And can really use some affordable options. Okay, so that was the bigger picture for Anchorage. Now when we move into Midtown itself, this is just the 3 lines of growth rates. And really for Midtown, the number we're using right now is about a 0.6% growth rate. So we're saying Midtown could possibly grow at a faster rate than Anchorage as a whole. And that's actually based on the last few years of how the population trends have been. And that kind of translates into this forecast kind of slash target. We won't call it a target. What should we be planning for in Midtown? So roughly 390 units from that 0.6% average annual growth rate of the population moving into Midtown. About 143 from the overcrowding in the census tracts, giving you about 500 or so new units. It's a good target. I think the plan that Christine mentioned in downtown has, I think, a 1,400 unit target for downtown. So seems sort of like the right level of housing need. And then we also have like you know, an estimate of rehab as well. Okay, so just shifting a little bit away from the details on housing, I wanted to share just a few key findings from the questionnaire. Again, this was, I think we sent this to roughly 20 kind of real estate developers and brokers who are familiar with Midtown. You got about 10 responses, I want to say. So this first question was kind of which land use activity do you think has the most market potential? And probably not surprising, hospitality is still coming up with high potential, very high potential, moderate potential. Seems like everywhere we turn, there's a new hotel in Midtown, and the development community continues to see that as a positive in terms of market potential. Retail, mixed use development, and then the lower density multifamily residential all got some of that teal color of, you know, moderate potential for market growth. And then just, you know, some of this is information that's probably similar to what we talked about in the previous public meeting, but what makes Midtown appealing for residents, also what makes it appealing for development, proximity to transportation, proximity to jobs and reduce commute times, near that high traffic volume, so people will stop in and go to businesses. Are some of the top vote getters for this question. And then the development community was also asked what's less appealing for development. Number one, I think everybody voted on was that financial feasibility piece. And so, you know, our work in this project hasn't really done a deep dive into financial feasibility, but we've done a lot of work with the development community looking at what's feasible. And the situation in Anchorage is that oftentimes the construction costs are much higher than the income that can be generated from that project. So projects often, you know, just don't pencil and make it really hard to make them move forward. People also mentioned the availability of developable land, perceived neighborhood safety, and some of the concerns around people experiencing homelessness. And then one other highlight I wanted to show was just, you know, again, thinking about the housing component, what type of residential development is most feasible? And it's really kind of that moderate density, either the townhouses or condos or the mixed use or the work units. We call them missing middle housing. It's like the duplexes, the fourplexes, you know, maybe it's 10 units in a building. Those were the kind of residential product that was considered more feasible. And a lot of times that's because there's not steel construction or elevators in those kinds of buildings, making it slightly more financially feasible. Okay, so just the takeaways from all of that data is that Midtown's population has been growing, and we think it's going to continue to grow despite the overall slow growth in Anchorage as a whole. That housing for the lower income and middle income households is in high demand, particularly due to overcrowding and pent-up demand. There's really less demand for office space overall, but local serving, retail, and hospitality continues to be a growth area. Development of that medium density residential seems to have a lot of potential. And then there's just some challenges, but especially that financial feasibility. So when you're thinking of policies in the plan, it's helpful to think about ways that could incentivize that development to come about. Any questions on that? Do we have time?
You're good. You can take a couple questions.
Yes.
What's the biggest problem in building new residential development? I think the biggest problem is, according to a national economist who studies housing, all in that space.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna give you this so you can ask the question again, so everybody can hear you.
The biggest problem in developing residential, new residential developments. I'm a residential developer, private project manager. I do that in Anchorage and also in Matsu. The top economist for the National Home Builders Association discovered that 45% of a new house in a new subdivision is directly related to municipal regulations. If you compare the municipal regulations of Anchorage to Matsu, it's uncomparable. Uncomparable. The price of housing in Matsu is dramatically lower, although the quality is the same or better. But one of the big things that's limiting our ability to grow in the new town is the limitations that the city is putting on us and how we do that. And I would suggest that we might put together a group to look at that. And I can help you by bringing in a couple other project managers to look at that. Because it'll make a huge difference. The amount of construction in the Matsu now, it's done unbelievable. Hundreds and hundreds of new residential subdivisions. And where are they coming from? Anchorage.
When you say that the problem is in this
Regulation.
regulation, are you talking about code? Zoning, the zoning is the problem.
Zoning.
Bless you. Maybe we'll mute you. Okay, are there any other, we're gonna get to the discussion part in 1 second. Are there any other questions? Question, okay.
I'm curious, how much has the removal of parking minimums affected the way that residential and other infill developments, pencil out in Midtown.
Do you know the answer to this yet?
I don't have an exact answer, but, I can just say that I've done pro formas where there has been no parking requirement in downtown. And they still, were underwater, right? So they still needed assistance and they didn't pencil. But I've also seen some projects, particularly commercial recently, that just couldn't happen with the full parking requirements, so. It's definitely helping, but it's not gonna fill the gap. And a lot of times developers are, rightfully so, need to have some parking on site anyway, so that's trying to figure that out.
When you're mentioning low income housing, what is the price range that you're considering that, like the per month and then the like overall total if they were to buy? What's that price range?
So again, if you take the 30% rule, which we know that the folks who make less money are actually paying more than 30%. That orange colored part of the bridge, rents between 300 and 1,800 a month, or housing costs between 300 and 1,800. That, turquoise is more like 1,800 to 2,400 in housing costs per month. And then when you're in the teal side, the higher income is, north of that 2,400. And that's just an estimate. It really depends on the household composition, whether you have just one income earner or two. But roughly that's the 30% of those income ranges.
You're saying that housing costs, not including the utilities.
For the rents, it would include the utilities. Yeah.
I am Johnny. My question is, when you're evaluating the pop-up hotel experience that we're having in Anchorage, I would consider a hotel near residential. So is it the cost per evening in the summertime for a visitor? And like, is the ROI simply summer tourists paying high dollar per night that makes a hotel pencil? Because whether we're talking restrictive code or not, the reality is those are essentially residences that you're charging per night as opposed to a monthly.
Yeah, it's, I think one of the main, I'm not a hotel market expert, but the main indicators, the RevPAR, the revenue per available room that kind of averages over the whole year, and definitely the summer kicks in a big chunk of that, but there's a lot of folks that are still staying there in those hotels in the winter, either for work trips or whatnot, and it definitely pencils, doing projects where they try to bring the hotel and the residential together to help cross-subsidize, which is a great idea.
We're gonna take one more question and then we'll move on. And then have questions at the end.
Thank you. For the goal of 500 additional housing units, so like that accounted for population growth and overcrowding. Does that account for, the need as things stand even before population growth for more housing, considering that we have about 3,000 unhoused neighbors? And is that part of that calculation?
Well, so that number that you got, 3,000 is more like citywide, so, yeah, I mean, there's actually, I kind of cut out the middle of this graphic. So if you saw at the June meeting, there's this kind of bubble where it says, what else are we missing? So, folks are unhoused, those situations where you have growth in a company and people can't get their employment spots filled because people are leaving or they're not moving here. Those are things you could add into the forecast. It's just hard to figure out how not to duplicate with the other metrics, but yeah, not exactly included. And it's, the reason we use the word target is it's less of a forecast because the historical trends won't lead us to this number, even the 500 is more like, what's the reasonable target that we're shooting for in the next 10 years?
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm sure that in addition to the exercise we're about to do is gonna lead to more questions, so we'll be available to do that afterwards. Okay. We have people online, we have people in the room. And it's my job to keep you on time. Okay, so we're gonna break out 2 times. And for those of you who have an agenda on your table, you're gonna see the 2 questions at the bottom that we're gonna deal with, okay? And here's the deal, we're not gonna go over all these visions and goals one by one. We're not gonna do it, that's the work that you're gonna do right now. But what you do know, a little framework, and this is how we're gonna figure this out, there's three groups of visions and goals. Vision 1 is economy. Midtown transforms into a robust mixed-use destination. All the goals and actions under there are related to the economy. Second, sense of place. And then the third is safety and crime. So what we're gonna do is, let's see, I think that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sean and Megan, you probably talk about things all the time. Would you like to join that table? So we can have 6 groups, okay. And then you can leave whenever you want. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, don't include us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's great. It'll be a little group of 2 then. And if you need to shuffle, we can do that. I'm sure that those 2 can have a very engaging conversation. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna assign you a topic area because you're not gonna have time to do all 3 topic areas. But I would like you 2 to do vision 1. I would like, hey, Johnny Hayes in the back. I would like your table to focus on vision 1. Okay, so vision 1 in the back and vision 1 here. Table over here, vision 2. Table over here, vision 2. Okay. Vision 3, vision 3. Okay. Online, you're gonna focus on 1 vision. We're gonna put you all into a breakout group. And I'm gonna let you pick which one you do. That'll be your first task. Okay. So Lucy's gonna leave and break you out, and I'll let you know when to come back. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 10 minutes to answer this question. You have tools on your table. You have markers on your table, and you have large yellow Post-it notes on your table. This is where somebody is gonna write down what you talked about. So you need to decide who at your table does that, okay? Here's the question that you're gonna answer for the vision which you've been assigned. Do the vision and goal statements reflect the future you would like to see in Midtown? So what we're really asking you is, based on all the work we've done since the last public meeting, did we get it right? Did we get right what you talked about at the last public meeting? Are these the right vision and goals? So we'd like your feedback on those. So talk about those for 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna have all of you report back for 5 minutes, okay? Go.
So, because you're, are you in a breakout?
Okay.
So I see. The whole mixed up areas. That's why
All right, I got it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, just make sure people are heading in the right direction.
And a four.
I need to
Right, that's right.
Almost like they could have stand and made it room. We could run the volume here. Make sure you don't have any kind of.
And your five. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, is everyone in the main session? Can you hear me? This is Lucy Whitlinger. I'm with Huddle. And I am going to work with you on the breakout session. So I can go ahead and unmute. We can unmute all. And we can start working through this first visioning question that we have. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. So I had gone ahead and shared with you the Midtown District Plan, the guiding themes, which has the 3 visions on it, but I'm going to go ahead and share that again with my computer. So I think everybody should see the screen share. Can everybody see that now?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, fantastic. So what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing on vision 2, which is sense of place. So this is Midtown has a clearly identified sense of space, sense of place. And with that, we have 4 goals identified underneath this vision. And from there, we have action items. So these are like your implementation items for the corresponding goal for that vision. So we'll read through that in a second, but our first breakout is, does this vision and goal statement reflect the future you would like to see in Midtown? So that's the first question we're wanting to answer. So I'm going to go ahead and take notes as we kind of go through this discussion, and we'll have about 10 minutes to do this. So first question again is, does the vision and goal statements reflect the future you would like to see in Midtown? So let's just start with the vision 2. Midtown has a clearly identified sense of place. What does everyone think about that as a vision for the Midtown area? Is that a vision that we would like to include?
I kind of wonder what the importance of having a sense of place, like boundary lines and identifying areas. I'm kind of curious about kind of where that came from.
Yeah, so I think just like Holly had kind of covered in terms of like what is a district plan and why do we need them, Because we already have these overarching documents such as the 2040 and the 2020 plan. But there are certain areas within Anchorage that are different from one another. And it could be that what happens in Midtown might be different from what happens in South Anchorage. And so this plan is a document to help provide some guidance for what we want the Midtown area to look like, as opposed to like downtown. Do we want Midtown to look like downtown in the future? Or would we want Midtown to look like another part of Anchorage? Or does Midtown have its own identity? So we can just read through the goals. So goal 1 would be establish a core Midtown area that is clearly identified with abundant signage and wayfinding. Goal 2 would be enhance Midtown's premier commercial environment through new residential development throughout the area. Goal 3 would be augment Midtown's streetscape by modifying and adding new trails, sidewalks, site connectors, landscaping, and street modification to create a more walkable and aesthetically pleasing environment. Goal 4 would be better activate Cuddy Park through enhanced safety, more public activities, and adjacent residential development. So these are some of the goals that were identified through this process of how Midtown can have a sense, a clearly identified sense of place that kind of sets it apart from other areas of Anchorage. Does that answer your question, Shannon?
Yeah, it does. I think it's probably the wording I'm just getting hung up on. It's,
So when we
Exhibiting
have
vision
these
something.
plans, yeah, so the vision is kind of not like, where are we now? It's like, what do we want Midtown to look like in 20 years? So in 20 years, Midtown has a clear sense of place. So like, it might not right now, but that's our vision for the future. And then the goal supports what that vision is. So the goal, says like, okay, well, a goal would be establish a core area. And then an action could be commissioning a marketing plan for Midtown that looks at signage and wayfinding and marketing of Midtown. Does that kind of help?
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just ask the question. So what would you what do you see the future of Midtown? Or what would you like to see as in the future of Midtown?
I think a lot of the things you guys are talking about are good. Supporting commercial businesses, rehabbing residential throughout the area, adding additional residential, and then improvements to streetscape. I don't necessarily know that Midtown, I don't envision Midtown being a marketed place necessarily. People don't come to Anchorage or even Alaska for downtown Anchorage. Alaska kind of sells itself, and trying to break out Midtown from the rest of Anchorage. I'm having a hard time seeing where there's like a value add there.
I think the reason why is because there could be certain recommendations in terms of zoning or other recommendations that we say in Midtown, it lends itself to maybe more dense housing, residential, instead of like single family homes, like, or you would have more mixed use development in an area such as Midtown.
Yeah, okay. So to get like zoning ordinances customized kind of for the region that it identifies as.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why like these district plans, they really help create a vision and some actions for saying, okay, well, Midtown is kind of a unique area of Anchorage, and there might be things happening here that are different. And so how can we put together some action items or some goals to help that? So like you were saying, so let's just look at the first one, because you were kind of talking about like housing and economy. So let's just look at the first vision. So vision 1 talks about the economy. So Midtown transforms into a robust mixed use destination. And again, this is like that vision statement for the next 20 years. Is that something that you would like to see for the future of Midtown? Is that Midtown is a robust mixed use destination?
Yes.
Okay. And then goals associated with that would be Midtown is a mix of uses that creates an exciting live, work, play environment, converts surplus commercial space to residential, provide missing infrastructure that will help support housing and redevelopment projects. The core Midtown area will be strengthened by limiting activities that might negatively impact the area, provide incentives for new housing opportunities. So each of these goals would support the vision of transforming Midtown into this robust mixed-use destination. As I was reading through some of those goals, did you have any knee-jerk reactions of like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, or like, oh, I don't think that's a great goal associated with the vision?
The only one that kind of stood out to me was
No, I know, but.
just the stringent goal number 4, limiting activities and because in a sense that does limit development. You know, people,
Everyone, oh, I.
one thing that attracts people to certain office buildings is, you know, what's nearby, what restaurants, what bars, what places, you know, to go eat at after work. And I think Anchorage has enough limitations and just with DOT and the zoning anyways. I'm not necessarily supportive of just adding stringent standards.
Okay, and let's get the people who are.
But the rest of them look good.
Okay, it sounds like they are wanting to move on to the next question in the main room. But I think that's a good observation. I think.
Hey, Lucy.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you wrap up and come back? I mean,
Sure
you're already
can.
here, but you know.
Sure, we'll wrap up. We'll be with you in just a minute.
Okay, and you're broadcasting in the room right now, so.
Oh, fun. Hi, everybody.
Okay, so I'm just gonna have you stop so we can start reporting out.
And we all agreed that building more housing and making the streetscapes feel more walkable and accessible for folks that are not driving. You know, those are the most important things. We also like the other goal of making Cuddy Park a little bit more active. We all agree that the way to make it active would be to build more housing near it, so people are actually excited about going, or people who live nearby can easily access the park. And then also making it accessible to, or via the trail system, so that people can, you know, bike or walk to the park for any events that are held there. And then finally, we're also curious or excited about the idea of developing more infill housing and existing residential. We're also wondering where there is potential for new housing in the existing core of the town, because it seems like there's a lot of parking lots and existing buildings. So that was that was a summary. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay, next group over here, right? Okay, what kind of discussion did you have? We did not get to goal 4.
Okay.
So we focused mostly on goal 1, 2, and 3. And most of what we discussed stemmed from Midtown needs branding. So in order to have a sense of place, we actually discussed some of the other neighborhoods around town that, for lack of a better term, have branding.
like Gateway. If, when you drive into Gateway, you actually drive through a gateway and it says, welcome to Gateway, and there's little planters at the bottom, and they're at every four-way stop, there's little gates that you drive under. And so we were talking about if you're trying to identify Midtown as a sense of place, then having consistent visuals in the signage, consistent font, consistent colors, and using the storefronts, because it is mixed use, using the storefronts and the neighborhood signage to create just really an overall sense of belonging through visuals. Then we also talked about the wayfinding to include signs not just on trails, but also on the streets that point to the locations of community importance. So like the library, the post office, Cuddy, and the other parks, the airport, so that anytime a resident or a tourist is in the Midtown area, whether they're biking, walking, or driving, they can look up and know how to get to the important parts in Midtown. We also said that Midtown needs a tagline. So we brainstormed some of those, but we'll leave that to the experts. And then something else, another action item that was brought up was quick build infrastructure. So that was a reference like the bike lane that was put on 6th, and how you can restripe versus resurfacing to get quick access to structural changes without going through the whole process. And that Vision 1 is key to Vision 2, as a sense of place is a mixed use place. You have to elevate the residential and new uses in addition to the commercial. So Vision 2 does not happen if Vision 1 does not happen.
So where's Gateway?
Thank you.
It's off of Tudor.
Okay.
Like if you're going back toward whatever medical facility is back there, when you turn, there's like a white lot. Yes, and so when you turn, it says, welcome to Gateway. It's really cute.
Okay, Vision 3, safety and crime. Let's start over here. We'll come here last. We talked about this goal is a little bit of a sort of hybrid because, you know, we talked, or some other folks mentioned that it's nice to have a sort of positive vision for these vision statements, but this one inherently is a difficult one because it's not just about positive, but about addressing some of the biggest challenges that exist in Midtown. But we talked about how there's both like, you know, addressing those challenges. There's kind of 2 sets of goals we saw under this vision. And the first 2 listed there are the sort of positive ones, or I'm sorry, it's actually the opposite. The second 2 are the positive ones, talking about how we can bring more life to the Midtown area. But in order to do that, we want Midtown to be a place that is safe and welcoming for all people. And those things feed each other, right? The safer it is, the more welcome people feel there, the more people and activity there is in Midtown, the safer it will be. So that's our high level thoughts.
Thank you. You can pass it right over to the next table.
We agreed with most everything you just said. We did have disagreement at our table. Vision 3 is for safety and crime prevention, and goal number 1 is safety and crime prevention. And the action item is enforce the laws, basically. And we thought, well, that's not currently working. So it was Chris. Yeah, Chris thinks that the way it is written actually means that we will be doing something over and above what we're doing. But we think the way that it's written says we're going to continue to doing the status quo, which is not currently working. And then goal 2, like you said, is more positive. It's establishing tools and eliminate all overnight camping within Midtown. I think that we skirted around the edges of that because it's going to be what's legal at the time, and those laws have changed recently. So goal 3 was the one that we focused on. We think that goal 3 is actually the solution that we should be looking for, and maybe it should be worded in a manner that makes having more 24-hour commercial businesses and housing, so there's more eyes on the street, more people on the sidewalks, more lights lighting up, more people looking out when noises are heard and made. And that should be the focus of all of the crime and safety. And we all agreed on that. And then for the outdoor, private and public spaces, we said the chalet at Cuddy Park that has been in design for 40 years should probably be a priority. More housing along Cuddy Park and the chalet in Cuddy Park that could be staffed for 18 hours a day would do a great deal towards keeping eyes on the street and eyes in the park.
Chris, do you have a second opinion, Chris?
I'm not sad. I like it the way it's written, but I do agree that Cuddy Soleil to be added and the and we also are, we talked about, another gentleman that was sitting here, he wanted to add that we need more housing in Midtown, because again, you have 24 hours, you have more visual. So I personally like the way this is written and with those two caveats added. And I think that's what you got. Yeah.
Did you want to take on that or you?
Yeah, back to it, the wording was strengthened. I think we were kind of focused on like, how do we enforce the laws that are currently there and how do we know these vacancies, right? We're trying to focus on how do we strengthen the current law.
That's what I heard. Thank you. Okay, Lucy, do you or someone online want to talk about your discussion?
Sure, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we had looked at vision number 2. And then it was discussed that looking at vision 1 was more in line with the discussion. I think there was agreement with the first vision and it being a robust mixed use destination. But when we talked about goal number 4, I think we were, Shannon was a little bit, didn't really like the language being limiting activities, even though the actions kind of supported that, but having like that type of language in a plan that you're limiting things. However, when we didn't get a chance to really talk more into what the action items were in terms of creating more stringent use specific standards and such. And then there was also just some discussion about the second vision and creating a sense of place. And there was just some discussion about the need to create a sense of place in the Midtown area and what that could mean. So I think our next breakout session will be a little bit more productive.
Except we're running out of time. Question. I guess let's just pose the question, understanding that we have a hard stop of 8 o'clock, but there's a lot of us here. Would this room be willing to stay a little longer and do one more breakout session? Would you do that? Would you stay for 15 more minutes? Would you be into that? Okay. All right, we're gonna do 15 more minutes, and that means the project team has to hustle to get out of the BP Energy Center, but we're gonna do that. Okay, so online, I would like you to, well, you kind of fluctuated between vision 1 and vision 2, and that's okay if you want to do that again. And in the room, I'd like you to stick with your same vision areas, okay? So 1, 2, and 3 do the same thing. So you've also noticed that we started getting into the actions here based on the goals that are on the paper. But what I want to start talking from you all is, do you have any other ideas on how we might get those goals done? Like, what else could we do to achieve those goals? What would an implementation plan look like? What are some actions? What can we start doing? Do you have ideas for that? Any questions about that? Okay. So I'm gonna give you about the same amount of time and then we'll wrap it up after that. Okay. All right, Lucy, I'm gonna mute and stop the video.
Oh, she's what? Oh,
Okay, I'll take care.
Okay, we got you, Lucy, right?
yep.
All right, it looks like LB and Lisa are still in the breakout room, but it's gonna boot them out of there in like 8 seconds. So, okay, action, how are we gonna get it done? Vision 1, that is you, yeah. I won't take your notes again.
Yeah, so we had, again, several more fine grained thoughts. But one thing we talked about, getting back at what we said at the start about, let's do kind of a bigger picture, more forward looking, more positive vision for this vision. One thing that we had suggested was, let's do more pilot projects, demonstration projects. Let's say, have a competition to design a mixed use block in Midtown and then support that. Maybe there's federal grants that we can use to support that. Just trying something new, providing good support in terms of, the buildings as well as the streetscape. Are there new types of housing that might be innovative and really try to make something out of Midtown? And then one good piece of information would be to ask Midtown businesses if they could do anything, like if they could fulfill all their dreams for their business, what would that be? And what is preventing them from doing that? And how can we support them in realizing that dream? Is that correct?
Thank you, Emily. Okay, Johnny Hayes.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Our group did stick around to provide input, but actions for Vision 1 economics, remove the restriction, the TIF restrictions, which are tax increment financing at the state levels. That'd be an advocacy or implementation strategy beyond municipality, but something you could support. Sales tax, promote a sales tax to supplement infrastructure improvements. Remove state requirements that prohibit cogeneration and energy implementation, which would reduce energy costs, making the ROI that much more palatable with feasibility. Create a housing authority, or at least to create a mechanism for ACDA to serve, and in that capacity, they can actually welcome other funding sources to make housing happen. Consider 2% gross assessment for 2% assessment for gross income and nonprofits. And dollar for dollar reduction of property tax from other income, i.e. a sales tax, to close the gap on feasibility. So sales tax would welcome outsiders to pay money that normally property taxes would pay, making housing pencil potentially. And then renew the city of lights and flowers era to sort of beautify and improve the value of place as it pertains to livability and just care. So some pieces for the plan.
Cool. Thank you, Johnny. Okay, 2. You guys.
All right, we'll keep it short. But we talked a little bit more about Cuddy Park, kind of got into some details on potential actions for that. Talked about using the archive site for something like a food truck park or farmer's market, to incentivize people to know about Cuddy, come to Cuddy during the day, come to Cuddy on the weekends that don't already come there. Talked about better seating within the park for like people in nearby office buildings to come on their lunch break. Personally very interested in this one as I am close by. Talked about running utilities, if there aren't any, we weren't sure what the status was of that, but to make it easier to do things like festivals and food truck carnivals. And then also talked about kind of the same sort of thing we've been talking about already with housing and better activation of the space. Also talked about urban trails, using the ideas of like named routes through Midtown, using examples of in Austin, they have like bird feet as a trail that guide you through to different destinations within the area, to try to incentivize tourists to wander who are already there for things like hotels. And yeah, campaigning to get more folks to come out to Cuddy Park.
Thank you. Remind me who else was 2. Thank you.
Yeah, we were generally curious again about how the city can incentivize more housing in Midtown beyond just changing the zoning and code of the area. We kept coming back to encouraging active transportation in the area, especially on Denali and Fireweed, Spinard, Benson, and Northern Lights. There's a great idea to potentially shut down a street, one day a week to, or like a farmer's market or something like that, or just keep it closed, for good. And then I added this one at the end, just adding more trees. That's it.
Okay, great, we'll start here.
So we had a discussion that the goals, I guess 1 and 2 seemed counter to the action number 4 for the vision 1, where they're talking about limiting the transitional living facilities. Filters, and that by actually having some of those businesses in the area would actually achieve having a commercial business also. So it seemed like maybe that might be more intuitive to make sure those businesses are included. Maybe not large ones, but small and medium facilities. That was mostly what we talked about.
Yeah, so activating more public spacing, as soon as you actually, make things happen, you will push away the crime and.
Thank you very much. Okay. Vision 3.
I think the main thing we agreed upon was the City Park adjacent archives land. Possibly being turned into like a mixed use development with like small businesses, shops, restaurants on the bottom, housing on top. Activate that space with people living there and frequently dining and shopping there. You have access to the park and like mentioned before, the chalet is the way to 24-hour eyes on.
All right, Lucy. Yeah, I came at her. Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
All right, I'm just gonna speak to some of the things that we heard online. So we were talking about Vision 2 and we, goal 3 talks about the streetscape and what action items could come of that. I think what we had heard online is that we want to get people more comfortable on the streets in Midtown area. And so one of the things that they suggested were having stewards from the community that activate those streetscapes and spaces, not necessarily maybe police officers that are there just kind of patrolling or walking the streets, but maybe other community members that could be there doing cleanup or just activating the streets. And then there was some other discussion about incentivizing for converting existing development for more housing opportunities, particularly for older generations or our aging population. Looking at what we can do to encourage the municipality to look at regulations and zoning and other code and permitting requirements that could make that easier for infill development. Thank you.
Thank you to our online group for being patient with technology and for participating. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope it was a good mix of you learning about some data about the economics and the housing and what has happened this summer, with a little bit of a reflection on the vision and goals and how we're gonna start moving that forward. So basically, the next time you hear from us, we're gonna take everything we've learned so far and pull it all together to start pulling a plan together. Can you also give them your email address? Yes. Melinda Gant, Gant,
Actually-
GANT@atda.net. It's on the agenda. And all the project information, we have a special project page specifically for the Midtown. So just get onto projects and atda.net. Just gonna do a friendly reminder. Please take the survey if you haven't, 2 minutes of your time. We're using this as part of the information for our district plan. And if you enter your email, you have a chance to win a $100 Visa card.
Last thing I'll say is that if there's anything else you're dying to say, Melinda email address is important. That's your portal to submit additional comments, okay? Thank you from all of us. It was lovely to spend some time in the room with you tonight. Thank you.